Okay, Volume 6. That's what we're at. Volume 6, the Bible story. And my book has Esther on the front in the yellow dress. Okay, we are at part 4. And see, we got a few more stories. And then we'll be through with this book. Excuse me. Okay, so we're in part 4, story 5, Swallowed by a Fish. A lot of people knows this story. And I got to be very careful with this page because it's got that factory tape on it of them making sure that nothing fell out. Okay, and these books hadn't been open in a really long time. Okay, Swallowed by a Fish. Excuse me. One of the most exciting stories in the Bible is that of a man who was swallowed by a fish. It happened a little more than 100 years after the death of Solomon, when Palestine was divided between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. And Assyria ruled the world. Yeah, I had to get my brain straight. And Assyria ruled the world. At that time, the word of the Lord came unto Jonah. And it's got a pause. Saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, known everywhere for its wickedness and cruelty. It was the last place that Jonah wanted to go. God had asked him to go to Jerusalem. Had God asked him to go to Jerusalem or Samaria or even to Damascus, he would no doubt have gone gladly. But Nineveh? Oh no, not Nineveh. It was no knowing what the people would do to a preacher of righteousness there. So Jonah made up his mind to go as far from Nineveh as he could, to some place where God couldn't find him. Yeah. So he went down to the docks at Joppa and found a ship that was going to Tarshish in the south of Spain. So, didn't realize that Tarshish was at the was south of Spain. Having paid his fare, he went on board. Once below deck, he felt safer. No one, not even God, he thought, would find him there. And by the time he got to Tarshish, God would have forgotten all about him and sent someone else to do his job. But he never got to Tarshish. Nobody can run away from God. And when the ship weighed anchor and made for the harbor mouth, he was closer to Jonah than ever. Sorry, I get my people mixed up. Worried and discouraged, Jonah soon fell fast asleep. But God didn't. He had his eyes on the ship and his runaway prophet. Pretty soon the wind began to rise. The choppy sea became rougher and rougher, tossing the tiny vessel about like a cork. Great waves began to break over her bow, and both captain and crew feared she would founder. Basically sink. This says founder. Okay? As the tempest grew worse, they grew they threw the cargo overboard. Then, with the ship rolling this way and that, in that seems in what seems to be her last agonies, yeah, be her last agonies, every man began to cry to his God for help. Some cried to Baal, some to Asherah, some to Moloch, but no help came. At that moment the captain, going below, perhaps to see if the ship had sprung a leak, found Jonah asleep. Angrily he woke him, crying roughly, "What do you mean, O sleeper? Arise, call upon your God." Jo- Jonah staggered to his feet in a daze, but the awful pitching and tossing told him that the captain was right. The ship and all aboard were in deadly danger. As he joined the crew, some of them asked, "Let's cast lots to find out who brought this evil upon us." And they did. And the lot fell upon Jonah. In other words, they played dice. Pretty much. Then they all turned upon the runaway prophet with one question after the other. "What is your occupation?" they asked. "Where do you come from? What is your nationality? And why are you traveling on this ship?" "I am a Hebrew," said Jonah, "and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then he told how God had called him to preach in Nineveh and how he was afraid, and he ran off the opposite direction. "What shall we do?" And then it has a pause, "that the sea may be calm?" they asked anxiously. "Throw me overboard," said Jonah. But the men didn't want to do that. It seemed too cruel. So they bent the oars again and rowed their hardest to bring the ship to land. So they didn't want to throw him overboard. And so this at the top has him getting on the ship, and this and at the bottom is it with the waves, the storm. So this is the first one, him getting on the boat at Joppa to go to Tarshish. And then at the bottom is the ship being tossed in the sea on their way to Tarshish. And of course, him in the bottom, in the bows, yeah, that's what they call them, the bows, asleep. Okay. Then it says, it was no use. The waves were too much for them, and they had to give up. Then they came to Jonah again. Was he still willing to be thrown overboard? He was. He knew in his heart that all this trouble had come because of his disobedience. And why should so many die because of his sin? So they took uh, so they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea. Almost immediately the wind died, and the sea became calm. As for poor Jonah, he went down, down into the dark green water, certain that he was about to drown. Then all of a sudden he had a strange feeling of being feeling of being sucked down a slippery tube. Uh, this is his version. but being well, he felt something. No longer was he fighting for breath in the ocean, but trying hard not to breathe the foul air of some great beast's stomach. Oh, so they're making reference like on a Pinocchio. Think about it. That scene in Pinocchio. Okay? He had been swallowed by a fish. No, it's not impossible. Men have been drowned by whales since then and lived to tell the tale. Been swallowed by whales since then and lived to tell the tale. And remember that the Bible does not say what that it was a whale that swallowed Jonah, but a great fish that God had prepared for this purpose. Anyway, poor Jonah was inside a fish and stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights, which in the Hebrews, which to the Hebrews of those times meant part meant parts of 3 days. For a while at least he was conscious. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's Conscious. Conscious. For he prayed for help from the fish's belly. What a prayer that must have been. What a confession of sin. What a cry for forgiveness. Wouldn't you pray very hard if you found yourself in such a dreadful place? Okay? Telling God about his ordeal afterward, telling God about his ordeal afterward, Jonah said, the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. Then I said, I am cast out of thy sight, yet I will look again towards thy holy temple. And the waters compressed me about, even to the soul. The depth closed me around about, and the weeds, half eaten by the fish, were wrapped around my head, and I went down to the bottom of the mountain. Yeah, mountains. There are mountains in the ocean. Okay? When my soul fainteth with me, I remember the Lord, and my prayer came unto thee, unto thine holy temple. Salvation is the Lord's. Salvation is of the Lord. In some wonderful way, God spoke to the fish, and it vomited up Jonah upon dry land. And the painting says it's by William Hutcherson. And that's a whole 2 pages. That's here. And it's a sperm whale. And the two texts are in the middle. So you really can't see the fullness of it without the text in the middle. And that's Jonah going down in the whale, and then the storm up the top stopping. And he got put on dried land. Okay. What a frightening experience it was for poor Jonah. Yeah, he was going the opposite way, and he got thrown up in Nineveh. How terribly dark and hot and slimy it must have been in the stomach of the fish. It was it was like being buried alive, and we can imagine that Jonah's hair may have turned white with shock. We may be sure the people of Nineveh listened to the prophet, for he had the most solemn story to tell. Here was a man whose life God had spared in the most marvelous way. He, his message must be from heaven. So when he cried, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown," the people believed him and repented of their sins. For a great, from the greatest of them even to the least of them, even the king himself put off his royal robes, covered him with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. That means he got down and dirty, pretty much. And published a decree saying, let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and cry mightily unto God. Yea, yea, let them turn every one from his evil way and from the violence that is in their hands. What a revival! What a turning back to God! Never had there been such preaching, never such wonderful results. All Nineveh, wicked Nineveh, had repented, and to think that Jonah had tried his best to run away from the job. What a lesson to all of us to do what God asks us then and there. And then, of course, it has Job standing up in front of all these people, or a character standing up in front of these people talking. And I said Job again. It's Jonah. And there he's talking to them and saying, repent, repent, repent. Okay. Well, guess what? That was part 4, story 5. So, and it's time for the break. So I'm going to break, and I'll see you in a little bit in the next story.